Hello and welcome to the culmination of the 2021 Arts Leaders of Metro Atlanta workshop. My name is Josh Phillipson. I'm the Principal Program Specialist for Arts, Culture, and Creative Placemaking at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Today, we're here to see the results of 4 months of classes and teamwork from the 32 members of this year's ALMA workshop. It's the Arts Leaders of Metro Atlanta, the ALMA workshop. Before we get started, I want to go over the agenda for the morning. There is a copy of the agenda that is on the event page, and I'm going to just drop this in the chat so everyone can see. If you want to follow along, there's some other materials on this page as well. We're going to give you an overview of our community engagement and arts work here in the Community Development Group at the Atlanta Regional Commission. Most of the program today will be our main event, seeing our 6 ALMA teams present their work. They're each going to have 10 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes of questions from our invited community jurors, who I'll be introducing when we get started. After the presentation, we'll share a poll. You'll get to vote on the audience favorite, just a quick poll at the end of the presentations. We'll hear from a panel of our participants on the ALMA process and the role of artists in community planning. Finally, our jurors, who will have stepped out during that panel, will come back and share their evaluation with us before we wrap up the day. I am going to pass it to my colleague, Marion Liu, the Community Engagement and Arts Program Manager. Good morning, Marion.
Thanks, Josh. So I just wanted to start off by acknowledging the enormous difficulty, but also opportunity of what we've embarked on together. And I don't mean, holding a leadership program virtually, although Josh has done a fantastic job keeping us together. What I mean really is, the responsibility of planning for and with the 6 million residents, and more every day in our communities in a 10-county region, and really welcoming each individual, and ensuring that each of them feels like they have a place and a voice in their own communities and in our shared future. And I know that this feels impossible, but that we have to continuously strive to do better. And so this is a moment, especially now, for the ARC and our arts and culture program to get to work and to fundamentally change and reimagine our role, not simply to plan or even to listen better, but to really help all of us deeply consider who and what Metro Atlanta is, who this region is for, and who we are in relation to one another, and to the country and the world. And so to do all of that, of course, we turn to arts and culture, and we turn to artists, creatives, and our culture bearers who have such a unique perspective, such unique ways of perceiving and of creating new worlds and bringing all of us into this process. We turn to them to lead. So that's why we're here today. So I just wanted to start us off with that and to pass it back to Josh.
Great, thank you, Marion. I want to tell you a little bit about ALMA overall this year before we get into it. This is a year of a lot of firsts for ALMA. We clearly were online because of COVID, but more significantly, we changed the core way the class is structured. If you're familiar with it before, we met 5 times, we covered a lot of different topics, and had a chance to just sort of learn an overview of arts and culture and how it relates to other issues in Atlanta. This year, we did it differently though. We intentionally sought and selected a class that was 1/3 from local government, 1/3 planners and community leaders, and 1/3 artists. And although we've had all folks from all of those in the class before, this was very intentional to make it split evenly like that. We organized the class into 6 cross-discipline teams and assigned them to 3 projects, 2 teams per project. During the class, we split the time between working on the projects and bringing in speakers to share their experience on how artists can be part of or lead community planning projects. So our idea with this was pretty straightforward. That is, we believe that the skills, the ways that artists look at problems, the very practice of artists is invaluable to the planning process. What's more, the part of planning process that we thought needed the very most attention, community engagement, is where artists may have the most to contribute. Where this is a fundamental part of many artists' practice, is talking to, listening to communities that they're from, communities that they work in. So with that structure, we brought 3 projects into ALMA. All 3 of these projects are connected to work that the community development group at the ARC is doing and will be doing. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the projects. The teams are going to go into much more depth on how they've solved these, but I want you to be grounded in what they were. Project number 1, Alleys in Tucker. We're working with the City of Tucker. We, the ARC, is working with the City of Tucker through our Community Development Assistance Program. ALMA teams worked on integrating public art into the alleys in downtown Tucker. A plan for doing so, a plan for bringing the community into that process in a way that enhances the sense of place in those spaces, creates an economic driver for local businesses, and allows all residents and visitors to feel comfortable and welcome in the city. Project 2, Our Region Remembers. Our teams are making recommendations for an artist-led community engagement process for COVID memorial development. We are looking for this work to inform the comprehensive economic development strategy for the region, which we are leading. Project 3, Bus Stop Creative Placemaking. This year's Livable Centers Initiative, that's our LCI program, includes an opportunities for communities to propose and provide creative placemaking around bus stops that improves access to transit and promotes community. The teams on the bus stop creative placemaking addressed that in their projects. As each team presents, you're going to be able to find additional information that they wanted to provide on the event page. That's the link that I put in the chat already. You can also find there a link, the very first link down under the materials is a link to the names and bios of every team, as well as our jurors, our panel, and the ARC staff, if you care to learn about who we are as well. So I encourage you to look at that. We have so many people that are going to be talking today that we are not going to do bios for all of them. I do want to recognize our jurors that will be responding to each of the presentations. We have 1 lead juror for each presentation, so you'll see them for each one, but all 6 of them are watching all of them. And those are Miranda Kyle from the Atlanta Beltline, Shaniqua Gay, visual artist, Dorian McDuffie from the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning, Josh Penny from MailChimp, and Councilmember Amir Faroki from the City of Atlanta, and Commissioner Doreen Williams from Rockdale County. So we will be seeing them as we get into that. I'm going to turn it back to Marion for just a moment.
Thank you again, Josh. So as part of our overall arts program, in addition to the changes that Josh has described for ALMA, we've also been running concurrently with ALMA for 2 months, a regional artist survey. And I want to introduce all of you to, I know some of you who have been in the class have already met Tatiana, but Tatiana Bell has been an essential addition to our team here as our intern since the beginning of the year. And so she has been really leading this work in the regional artist survey. And so I'm going to pass it to her to give us a little bit of summary and then next steps for what she's going to be continuing to work on.
Thank you, Marion. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Let's see. All right, can everybody see this?
You can, thank you.
Great. So as Marion said, I'm Tatiana Bell. I'm the intern for the Community Engagement and Arts team here at the Atlanta Regional Commission. You may have seen me popping up into your ALMA classes, but I'm here today to give you a brief presentation on my work thus far here at ARC. Like as she said, I've been here since January, and since then I've helped launch and manage our Metro Atlanta Artist Survey. I've also conducted follow-up interviews for that survey, and I'm currently drafting a handbook on how creatives, planners, and local government can work together on community engagement initiatives. And each aspect of this work is working toward our goal of eventually creating a directory of artists that our agency and partners can call upon for this work. So our Metro Atlanta Artist Survey was live from March 17th through May 12th, parallel to the timeline of our Arts Leaders of Metro Atlanta, or ALMA class. And goals for this survey were to identify artists who were experienced and interested in civic work and how we could support them in this work so that we can eventually create a directory of local artists that we can call upon for civic partnerships. And the majority of respondents for this survey, there were a little over 200, and the majority of them said that they were experienced in civic work and would be interested in being included in the directory, which got us thinking about how we can fill gaps for underrepresented groups and its creation. So to identify these underrepresented groups, I've analyzed our survey demographics against our regional demographics and its projected growth. So the graph on the left shows a collection of data from the census that ARC uses to show projections of our region's growing diversity. And in being aware of these changes, we need to be making the appropriate changes in our work to meet the needs of these shifting demographics. So this means identifying and encouraging the growth of these communities through providing opportunity and representation. On the right is a plot of our current regional demographics in comparison to our survey demographics in teal. Both plots show an overrepresentation of white people, which does not reflect the diversity of our region, nor does it align with the projected growth of its diversity. And I'll note that there's a smaller percentage of people who don't identify as Black or white. And this just means that these folks need that much more representation or inclusion and support to reach the same outcomes, especially those who fall under the category of everybody else, meaning that they didn't identify with the choices provided or that the population was too small to be its own category. And so one could look at all of this data and ask, well, shouldn't we be prioritizing those who make up the majority? And to that, I'd say that before we continue creating structures like this, we need to identify and attempt to tackle the issues of our existing structures, which are a result of the oppressive systems that white cisgendered people who make up the majority created and now dominate. So the need to restructure these systems is urgent and necessary if we are going to build and attempt to further integrate artists and communities into our work. All this to say that based on our survey data and responses, we have a few goals moving forward in our work, and they are representation, accessibility, and compensation. And I've included some direct quotes here from our survey respondents that highlight their desire to tackle these issues. Representation here refers to the inclusion of those who are often left out. And this includes queer and trans people of color, but also disabled communities, which alludes to my next point of considering accessibility in our work, not only to disabled individuals, but to all who may not have equal access or opportunity. And the only way to do this is by talking to those who are directly affected, but we have to compensate creatives so as to show respect for their narratives and time and energy and avoid being extractive of their experiences. So following the survey, we identified gaps in outreach and contacted local creatives and organizations who are part of these marginalized communities. We were not able to talk to people from all of the underrepresented communities, but obviously remain open to seeking and hearing their stories so that we may accommodate them in our work as well. So we conducted 4-hour-long interviews with these candidates: Taylor Alexander, Aisha Pennerman, Jesse Pratt Lopez, and Jack Pritz. And we had moving conversations about their experiences and how we can support them and their communities in our work. This has been my favorite part of the experience so far. There's a level of empathy in face-to-face, or should I say Zoom to Zoom? No, I shouldn't say Zoom to Zoom, but face-to-face conversation that you can't get looking at numbers and graphs. So the quotes here are representative of each conversation, and each interviewee mentioned representation, accessibility, and compensation in one way or another. In fact, out of our original goals, compensation was mentioned the most, 21 times in the 4 interviews, and each candidate stressed the need for funding for their work. Representation was also a hot topic, mentioned 19 times, and our candidates made it clear that they found it necessary to prioritize the representation of their respective communities in their work, specifically queer and trans people of color. And accessibility was also emphasized and was mentioned 18 times. One mention, they referred to the physical accessibility of the space, the accessibility of acquiring space, and also the accessibility of existing in space. So moving forward with these findings, I'll be designing and producing content for a handbook on how creatives, planners, and local government can work in successful partnership on community engagement initiatives. I'm working on that right now. And as I mentioned before, we'll eventually create a directory of local artists that we can call upon for this work. I created kind of a wireframe here, a rough wireframe of an example of what this could look like if it were an interactive web platform. There are a lot of forms that it can take, but however it takes form, we should be sure to feature artists from underrepresented communities at the forefront so we can work towards equitable outcomes. And that's my spiel. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our partners, Fulton County Arts and Culture, Department of City Planning, the Atlanta Beltline, and the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs for all their support through this work so far. And thanks again, everyone, for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of our Arts and Culture Forum.